Welcome to Sherrill Farm. In 1941, my grandfather bought this place. At a public auction, he bought about 150 acres, and he added parcels to it so that over time, the family grew and the farm became a real farm, and my father worked it and had a lot of memories here as a child. Well, it got out of the family hands in a direct sense, but I'm going to tell you the story because we've now gotten it back. In 1993, when I tried to move back here into this area, it wasn't ready to be bought back. The people that owned it didn't want to sell at the moment. But in 2004, my father, my brother John, and myself tried again, and indeed it was time. They were ready to sell, and we bought it back. Address of the farm is 1141 Hebbertsburg Road, Crab Orchard, Tennessee. Entry gate was built by my father in 2004-05 time frame. And this metal gate that you see was built by Rusty Waters. He is a friend of my father and Papa, and he was a metal worker. So on the farm, you're going to see a couple of things that are surprising. One is the metal work, the rock work, and the woodwork, fundamentally. Metal work is by Rusty, and rock work is largely by Toby Hilton, who in 2004 asked if he could work the quarries, and we didn't want to, but we said, hey, you get rock and you help us out around the farm. So we've spent the last 20 years with Toby moving big rock, and then Keith Arnott has helped considerably on a lot of the woodwork. I'm going to go in the farm and let's have a ride about. So in the early parts of after purchasing the farm and getting it ready, one of the first things we did, we cleaned up the old home place, which you'll see here just in a minute, and we call it the farmhouse, partly because Open Range started their office there. But one of the things that we noticed was how beautiful Baker's Branch is. Baker's Branch comes out of the mountain, and this territory is karst territory, so that means holes in the ground. And a lot of the limestone, a lot of the water flows through the limestone mountain and comes down and goes through the creek. And even in the driest of droughts in the last number of years, this creek has always flowed. So it's full of animal life, fish, tadpoles, snails, raccoons, and a lot of different creatures come up and down this creek, which keep the dogs quite busy barking. One of the things we did in 2021, basically this year, was we built Sherrill Crest house on top of the hill, and we're going to take a ride up there and look around briefly, and then we'll continue on the rest of the farm. The story of this Sherrill Crest Hill, basically also called German Hill in days gone by, was that in 1940, when there was the wartime, my grandfather would go out to the camps that were nearby and get some prisoner of war workers, and they cleared this hill all the way from here all the way to Crab Orchard, and they worked the farm as sort of a work detail, and therefore this hill has been called German Hill for a long time. On the upper side of the farm, and then we built on this area down here at the bottom, and we call this Sherrill Crest. On Sherrill Crest, I wanted to point out this little tree, this little oak tree, which we planted as part of Zach and Nicole's wedding ceremony. They watered it, they nurtured it, and they blessed it with their love, and we have planted it here on Sherrill Crest because if you look, Sherrill Crest happens to have a lot of powerful oak trees and this little thing will have a good time growing with this big bush. When we bought the place and began to fix it up, one of the main uses that we had was this farmhouse. My father literally gutted the inside of the farmhouse, worked with myself, Tim Towner, who was my open range angel for many years, and we made this the open range office for open range software, which I started as a business in 2004. This farmhouse in 1940-ish timeline, it's hard to know exactly. It's still on the original foundation, what happens to be just pillars of rock about that high. So it's quite modern in the sense that it gave you a wooden floor at the time, but it doesn't have much else, no insulation, and we took it a long ways in fixing it up. I'll show you just briefly on the inside. Supply of toilet paper that Papa prepared for me. One of the things with Toby we had in play was that he moved big rocks around, and Granny had a nice idea for a big long flower bed down this road, so we put this in and we call it the Flowerbed Pulloff because that's where cars can pull off and cross each other. But part of the memory here is ultimately Granny, being her typical self, got right here and she climbed up on there and was waiting for Zach's wedding and told us, we drove by and told her to get down, and she says, just go away and leave me alone. So we did. And come back a few minutes later and she fell right here and broke her hip. So we've spent the last month bringing her, 6 weeks, bringing her back to play, and she's full and ornery again and back in good health. But that just represented Granny. Maybe she'll quit climbing the walls, but maybe not. So this area right here is called the gravel pile, and as you can see, it's because there's a gravel pile and we just would put all our gravel here and use it. But part of this is called Granny's Grotto also. So as you move down through here, you'll see why in just a second, but we fixed this area up fairly nicely so that we could enjoy it. Let me show you what we did. One of the namesakes of this region is Granny's Grotto, and we buy statues for representing Granny's faith, the Catholic faith, which she's an extremely solid faith lady. So we made this section called Granny's Grotto that you can see from the main road. But Papa added to it and built a bridge we call Baker's Bridge that is back to the theme of, well, if you can think about it, Papa can do it. share with you. The wall you see here to your right, or to this side, is where an old grist mill on this creek used to be. An old grist mill where they did grain and such when Crab Orchard in its heyday. Here this fall we had a tremendous harvest of acorns, walnuts, and the deer and the squirrel are absolutely going to love it. On the other hand, because I have a road and it's full of walnuts, I don't exactly love it, but I'll deal with it. So after Papa got this hill cleared and we actually planted some grass and made it look good, we started having parties well before that. But the parties we had early on were a couple of benches and 5 or 10 people eating hot dogs on a little open fire. Then it kind of grew when it got better to a tent party. Then we got bigger and we started realizing we could have weddings here. Brian and Landon and Zach and Elizabeth, and we've just really enjoyed the parties. So we decided to build some structures that were more solid. So we have a pavilion now that we built, and John built that bar that we use at parties. The foundation of the campground is the bathhouse, of course, because even though we got a whole bunch of acreage here, people still wanted to go pee in the bathhouse. So I guess go figure. So, in very short distances, this farm seems like it has entirely new worlds, and this little world is what we call Meditating Rock. And we put a big rock here to help represent it, but you can see the beauty of it, and we were unable to get down to the bottom, so we had our friend Keith Arnott build some steps straight down and to a very beautiful spot that I want to take you to. Right below Fern Gully is the nice waterfall here. And we tried to figure out whether we could put a power grid here and let it help manage lights on the farm, but for now we're just enjoying the beauty of it. So this is Center's Bridge Drain, which is just at the bottom of the hill, Meditating Rock Hill. And I wanted to point it out just the moss. Look how pretty the moss is. So give it a good rock wall 20 years and it becomes a really nice, pretty moss-covered rock wall. But also we call this Center's Drain because it's hard to see, but right through the woods there is Center's Bridge, which that just puts you on the position of where the roads are. Havertsburg Road and Center's Bridge are right there. The last thing I wanted to point out here was in many places of the farm, probably 4 or 5, we put cameras on trees. And in this case, there's a camera right back there. So way back in the day when the farm was actually being worked pretty heavily, 1940-ish timeline, they would log forests and they would bring them down the creek and they'd bring it into what is the boom hole here, and they would boom those logs out. That's how it got its name, boom hole. And for a long time there was a large tree right in that center gap, and our family would use that swing to swing into the boom hole itself and splash, and we had a lot of family fun, and it was quite enjoyable. And here's some pictures. This sign represents all of the items in the lower field except for a couple that are brand new, which I'll walk you through here in a minute. We're going to take a quick trip to the worm bed and then we're going to go down the creek side of the road. The tree fell in. Everybody started swimming at the 2 Rock because it's got a nice rock bottom. Of course, now we have to call it 2 Rock and a tree because the tree has come down during the flood, but I think Mother Nature will fix that in the spring. About 3 years ago, I'm driving around the farm with John, and in the back of his truck, he's got this little teeny dried bamboo thing he bought from Amazon that he forgot to plant. So I said, hey John, how about I just plant that on the farm? So here we got 3 years later, we got our bamboo forest. That's what Ann made the sign on, and it's kind of cool. Spider Rock came up with a nice pretty picture on the creek, and we asked Rusty Waters if he could come up with a cool design, and what he decided to do was make a spider web and some spiders and the butterflies the spiders would eat. So in Tennessee, sometimes it's very helpful to have a place to go out and shoot your guns, and on the backside of our land we have a nice rock ledge, and we built a shooting range against that ledge along with the deck to shoot off of and a captain's chair to scope from. So we're about to go up Copperhead Hill, so called because in the days of past, when it was a little teeny road, we would walk up it or bike up it with our motorcycles, and quite often with the sun shining there was copperheads laying on the field, so it got its name called Copperhead Hill from way back when. We're about to go through what we call the quarries. There's 3 quarries. Sort of a first quarry that we're going to go through is going to be one that had large rock. They broke out many years ago. And then the concept of one man's trash is another man's treasure, they threw that rock aside, and we've been using it to build wonderful walls ever since. So on the way in, you'll probably notice the deer. There's a lot of wildlife that's not really worried about us since we don't really hunt them here. We just kind of watch them and they watch us back. But in 2004, 5, 6 timeline, my father, Papa, and the grandkids got together with Randy and basically built a barn. And that barn is for chickens and guineas and goats and whatever we can decide to come up with. But that barn's held itself very true for a long time, and we've certainly enjoyed using it. Inside the barn there's a well and a couple of cool areas that we enjoy as a man shack. So a couple of things I want to mention about for memory's sake is for probably 8 years of the 20 that we've had this, we had a water slide that went from right here at this sand pit all the way to the bottom towards the pavilion, and a big water hole that every year Toby would come up and dig and we'd fill it with water, and it was a blast. I'll share some pictures with you. So the last thing I'm going to share with you on the farm today is something that was I guess I'll call it a Corona moment, and you'll see what I mean just in a second. So this isn't exactly my Corona moment, although I can pretend, but the beach was an ideal that we had because this area was nothing but a big grown-up mass of brambles and trees, and with a Toby, a dozer from Keith Brady, and a couple of 20 tons of sand, we were able to create a really nice beach. So we're going to close out now. I'm going to bring Bronco to say, Papa, Granny, thank you so much for building such a strong family and for helping this farm become what it is today. This film is dedicated, or this documentary, if you want to call it, is dedicated to Granny Sherrill and Papa Sherrill.